Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thank you so much, Jack. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. So, the Department of Government Efficiency has been making headlines for weeks now, as you know, and on its website it says savings are up to $65 billion. And so I'm wondering, A, what you make of that, but B, isn't it Congress that ultimately is going to have to, if there are cuts to be made, isn't Congress going to have to really take the actions to make the cuts?
Well, absolutely. Our Constitution spells out, as you know, the various powers of the different branches of government. And Article 1, the first article, the most important article, gives the power of appropriations to Congress, not the executive branch. And so the problem with what DOGE has been doing, it's not that we are opposed to reviewing policies to determine if they have exceeded their time or if more efficiencies can be put into place. But the problem is that they're doing it in the face of what Congress has previously appropriated and cutting budgets, cutting things that through the legislative process and the hearing process, Congress has determined is an appropriate use of federal funds. And they've just done it wholeheartedly with a sledgehammer without regard to long-term federal employees, without regard to the legislative process. And in my opinion, it's a direct violation of the Constitution.
And I guess this is going to make its way through the courts because we've seen different federal judges have different rulings. And so I'm wondering, I mean, doesn't the executive branch, though, I mean, the executive branch does run the government. So doesn't a president, whoever it is, have some authority about how the agencies are run?
Well, sure. I mean, absolutely they do, but they don't have the authority to determine if an agency should exist. That's Congress's job, and so they don't have the determination to completely wholesale disregard the will of the Congress and which is by reflection the will of the people, as how our government is set up. And there's been several things that President Trump has done that is within his executive power. It's like the pardoning of the J6 defendants, for example. That's within his presidential power, and courts have certainly allowed him to do that. But what the courts are stopping him from are things that are not within his presidential power. Wholesale stopping of complete federal programs that he doesn't have the unilateral authority to disregard Congress's will.
And so what do you make of the mass firings?
Oh, I think they were just wrong. We have 2 million federal employees that President Trump is targeting. And what does this mean? This means that he's firing, I think yesterday he sent a notice out that he intends to terminate 60% of the workforce in Social Security. That's 60% of the people that process Social Security payments. He's firing 800 employees for the National Hurricane and Weather Service. So that means we're just not going to get notified of hurricanes and that notification provides people with life-saving opportunities to get out of harm's way, provides businesses with the opportunities to shore up and protect their property and homeowners. So he's just terminating that willy-nilly as well. I mean, he's making people unsafe, and it's alarming to me, and I think it's alarming to the vast majority of people in the public, which is why we're seeing so much outrage from folks across the country.
I also want to ask you about the House Republicans have passed a budget resolution to get the Trump agenda passed in what's called reconciliation, which is really more for the Senate side. A lower majority is required to get it passed on the Senate side. Instead of 60 votes, it would be 51 votes. But I'm wondering, this is about border security. This is about changing and encouraging U.S. energy production, oil and gas, and also making permanent the Trump tax cuts from 2017. And so I'm wondering where are you on all of that?
Well, I think his budget proposal is reckless and irresponsible.
How
And
so?
well, I think we can't just cut $880 billion out of Medicaid, for example. That eliminates all long-term care. It eliminates SNAP benefits for hungry children in this country. And that's not the moral compass of who we are. And the other problem that's really disingenuous about it is is the Republicans are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to say we need to cut our budget. Our deficits are extreme. Our deficits are unhealthy. And I agree with them. Our deficits are extreme and our deficits are unhealthy. Over 1/3 of federal government spending is to interest on the debt. And I do believe that the debt is becoming a national security crisis. But what that means, though, is you don't add $4.5 trillion to the debt to provide the wealthiest people in this country a tax break on the backs of all the people who need Medicare, on the backs of all the people who need Medicaid, on the backs of our senior citizens and the backs of our hungry children. They're not doing it the right way. Their arguments make absolutely no sense, and the people aren't having it.
So let me ask you, because when candidate Trump was running again, he campaigned on all this. He campaigned on making the tax cuts permanent. He campaigned on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. And so he's saying, I won. Republicans, make it happen. And that's what Republicans are saying. So what do you say to that?
Well, it's my understanding that the no tax on tips isn't in this budget. What the no tax is on the wealthiest 1% of the people in this country. And what we're doing is cutting critical services to our veterans. We're cutting critical services to cancer research, to Medicaid benefits, to education, to critical services that people rely on in this country, and not to the extent of lowering our deficit. They're adding our deficit. They're actually making our deficit bigger. So their programs don't make sense, and I don't think it's truth to the campaign of what they were trying to do.
So what is the answer in your mind to, I mean, because you said this is unsustainable. You said this is unhealthy. It's become a national security crisis. I mean, the national debt is what, more than 36 trillion. So what
Right.
is the answer? Is it just actual spending cuts and letting the tax cuts expire?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think we need to be prudent about our review and oversight of the programs of the federal government. I do think that Congress should take a comprehensive overhaul of the whole thing. The committees of jurisdiction, there's 12 appropriation spending bills. They are divided amongst 12 different committees. Those committees should be charged with, and the American people should demand that they do a comprehensive overview, piece by piece by piece, of the expenditures of the federal government to make sure that we're furthering the agendas and the purpose of our country, that we're taking care of our most vulnerable, that we're promoting democracy, that we're doing responsible government, but we're eliminating programs that maybe have overserved their time or are not achieving the goals that were initially met, or just don't apply anymore. And I do think we should do that. Cutting and reviewing the budget is not a bad purpose. The problem is we're not doing that. Three of Elon Musk's minions are doing that, not the congressional process. But we need to have an appropriations process. The Republicans have not been able to pass a responsible appropriations bill. They cannot get 12 appropriations bills through the Congress. They've only been doing stop band-aid measures of continuing resolutions because they can't get a budget done. And so we'll see if they can get a budget done March 14th. They're in control of the process. It's up to them to pass a budget. We'll see if they actually can get it done. I don't think they will.
But haven't there been continuing resolutions even when the Democrats ran? I mean, all this is just one continuing resolution after another continuing resolution
Right.
for
And I don't
years
agree with
already.
it. I don't agree with it when Democrats do it, and I don't agree with it when Republicans do it. I think Congress should do its job, and we should, do the legislative appropriations process. That's what we're elected to do, and that's what we should be doing. And if I were in charge, that's what we'd be doing, but I'm not. So here we are.
So let me ask you about, I know you've come out and opposed Governor Abbott's request for Congress to reimburse the state $11.1 billion. And so why is that? And what do you say to Democrats in the legislature who say they want to see that money come back to the state?
Well, speaking of waste, fraud, and abuse, the vast majority of what Abbott did with that money is just wasteful and fraudulent and abusive of the process. He basically had contracts for his personal minions to charge exorbitant amounts to bus people out of this state at not at a reasonable ticket price. And he just abused the system to enrich his friends under the name of some political guys. And so I'm not for that. I don't think we should reward and reimburse states who don't exercise the power of the purse responsibly either. And so I think, Democrats, though, in the state of Texas, were very much trying to fund education, trying to fund our schools. And I think that they are rightfully advocating for as much funding as possible to not give the Republicans the excuse to yet again not fund our education and not fund our schools properly. We had a huge budget surplus last legislative session, and the Republicans sat on it. They willfully ignored funding the children, the schools, and the teachers in this state, and it's inexcusable.
And my last question to you is about something that we as all Americans, or just about all Americans, not those in Arizona and Hawaii, but we're going to be springing forward on Sunday, March 9th. And there's always a lot of debate about whether, this should end. There was a bill back in 2023 that passed the Senate, but not the House, that would make daylight saving time, which we're going back to, permanent. And so I'm wondering, where are you on this? Because this always brings up a lot of debate. People are tired of switching. And then there's the debate of, well, should it be full-time daylight saving time or daylight standard time?
Well, it doesn't necessarily matter to me one way or the other. I just want consistency. I want it to be the same. I don't want half the country on one time situation and the other half on another, or the United States and the rest of the world on different things. It's too hard to manage who's on daylight savings time and who isn't. I just want one consistent rule that I can follow and know what it is and have it be the same wherever I am. And I think most people can adapt to whatever the rule is, but just have it be the one thing, whichever
All right.
side it is.
All right. Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jack, it's always a treat. Thank you for having me.
All right. You bet.